And here we are today for BEH 333, Epistemology and Worldview. And we are today evaluating human nature, Christian faith, and the Stanford Prison Experiment. This image here says we stopped checking for monsters under our bed when we realized they were inside us. This is kind of a foreshadowing and made sense as far as to what what type of human nature was exposed inside the Stanford Prison Experiment and its results. The Stanford Prison Experiment and the Bible both show immoral acts and give us a view into human nature kind of exposed. Both of these mediums show examples of maltreatment and immorality through which the underlying nature of sin is exposed. Some of those items were humiliation, profanity, violence, and abuse. Abuse toward the prisoners. Profanity was used by both the prisoners and the guards. The guards definitely used humiliating tactics against the prisoners as well. Some additional immoral acts as far as the guards of the Stanford Prison Experiment. Guards used the process of degradation, using humiliating and disparaging language to describe the prisoners, even commenting negatively on their genitals. Prisoners, in defense of themselves, began to use profanity in a personalized way toward the guards as a sense of rebellion. You see Dane Eshelman, known as John Wayne for his macho attitude, handed out or coordinated many of the punishments, especially the hurling of insults, forcing the prisoners to do push-ups, scrubbing toilets, and using the restroom while blindfolded and bound in chains. And also he forced the prisoner to hurl insults back at other prisoners. Guard John Wayne resulted to physical violence because of prisoner 416's hunger strike and smashed a sausage in his face. We're going to take a look at that here.
I thought, how dare this newcomer come in and try to change everything that we had worked for the first 3 days to set up, and by God, he's going to suffer for that.
Get in that closet then.
Frustrated by his continued defiance, John Wayne threw prisoner 416 into the hole. After punishing the other prisoners for his disobedience, John Wayne encouraged them to vent their anger at 416 directly.
Thank you, 416.
Okay, 209.
Thank you, 416.
We would use our nightsticks to bang on the door, and we would kick the door so hard that, it must have, shaken him very seriously inside, scared the life out of him.
He yelled at me and threatened me and actually sort of smashed a sausage into my face to try to get me to open up. But
that was just one example of some of the immoral and humiliating and demoralizing acts that were handed out to prisoners in the during the Stanford Prison Experiment. We also see in the Bible that there are immoral acts. For example, King David commits adultery with Bathsheba, and when she tells him she's pregnant, David has her husband Uriah the Hittite killed to cover up their act. Adultery is a sin, very immoral. Murder is immoral. some of the consequences of these acts and how they were handled in the Stanford Prison Experiment. The prisoners in the experiment began to experience depression and hopelessness during the course of the experiment. One prisoner had a panic attack and had to be released because of the stress, and the guards after the experiment felt very guilty about their actions. They didn't know that they had that within themselves to treat the prisoners so badly, to not intercede on their behalf when they could have, and you get to kind of see the different interactions that human beings have when it comes to stressful situations. In the Bible, the death of her husband sends Bathsheba into grieving. David has to deceive Bathsheba and his servants of his actions to keep his secret, and eventually God does forgive David of his sin, but the child of David and Bathsheba falls ill and dies. So they still have to deal with what it is that the sin inside of us created, and you see the human nature of people and their actions and how they interpret things, and even in the end you still have to deal with those consequences. Some things are just in our nature. The Stanford Prison Experiment demonstrates several dynamics of human behavior. It reveals the corrupting nature of power and why people in power act with hostility, act oppressively and abusively toward those that are not in power, how good people can be corrupted by negative situations. Similar to the first sin, God created us to be perfect human beings, but we sinned and we created the negative situation, and now we continually deal with this negativity and this sin. And this experiment revealed how the human spirit can be broken and made to conform, but it also demonstrated how even when being dominated, human nature still has need to find ways to resist and rebel. And we'll see an example of that here.
On the second morning, the prisoners had decided to stir things up as well. The guards found some of them had used their beds to barricade their cell. Prisoner 8612 was one of the ringleaders of the rebellion.
And here as well.
Prisoner 416 decided to go on a hunger strike.
They were pushing my limits, but here was a thing that I could do that could push their limits.
And we see even our human nature has the ability to rebel when we're in a negative situation. In the Bible, the story shows that human immoral behavior often leads to further immoral acts to cover up our wrongdoing, similar to the guard John Wayne, and how at the end of the experiment he's confronted by prisoner 416, and he cannot even admit how his actions were wrong, and he puts it off on how the prison guard experience turned him into that, and not that that was within him, but it was a character he created, though he was not asked to create that character by the investigator. And we also see how God is forgiving of David, but he still has to suffer the consequences, just like John Wayne has to suffer the consequences of his behavior and feeling the guilt that he felt after the experiment. Now, our faith can be used to guide our morality. Since God created the order of all things and gave man laws by which to abide, a moral law that assists sinners in seeing the error of their ways and come to seek Christ to receive salvation. The laws of men are not good enough by which to abide, and we must seek the laws of God and his grace. In Romans chapter 6, verse 14, for no sin shall longer be your master, because you are not under the law, but under his grace. God is the person that provides our strength, our cause for morality, because we are naturally born sinners. And Christians should use the guidelines that God has created and revealed to us through the scripture in the correct way and to behave morally. And Apostle Paul echoes this when he speaks on the matter of immorality in speaking to and treatment of people. But now you must also rid yourselves of things as these: rage, anger, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips, just as the guards should have when dealing with the prisoners. Now, the outcome could have been different in the experiment for two reasons. First, a simple reason that Zimbardo himself identified, which was that the need for the prison warden and principal investigator to be two different people with two different roles. Zimbardo even admits that he became disillusioned, treating the experiment more as a prison and less as a social and psychological study. He would have been able to keep the course on track otherwise. Second, my belief is that because there would be a higher power than man's laws to answer to God, the investigator may have had a higher chance to operate in a manner to God's liking. As Colossians says, set your mind on the things above, not what you're dealing with in front of you, but above to God, so that you're able to overcome some of these obstacles. Rather, the investigator being focused on creating a sense of boredom, fear, and power, Zimbardo could have directed the guards to treat the prisoners as they would have liked to be treated, to be kind, to communicate positively, and to take no pleasure in the failings of your fallen opposition. And this is referenced in Ephesians, Luke, and Proverbs. These teachings would have guided Zimbardo, the guards, and the Stanford Prison experiment in a more positive direction than the one taken.